To hear even more about both this topic and other issues not being covered nearly enough by the mainstream media, you're gonna wanna tune in every morning to our full hour-long show. That's at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, available on the TYT Network channel on YouTube TV. Everyone, to another week at the Damage Report, and I'm very excited to say that while we do have the normal sort of Monday cleanup to go through in terms of the news, obviously the passing of Senator John McCain, other issues that broke over the weekend, it doesn't look, and I don't want to jinx it, but it doesn't look like we've entered into the week with some sort of massive catastrophe. Obviously, there's violence as you'll have in America, and we'll be talking about that as well. But I saw a little bit of news about NAFTA this morning, and I got a little bit worried that he had drastically changed our trade policy again.
Politically?
It doesn't look like he did. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh no, I mean in terms of some sort of national, like some sort of big thing in DC that's gonna throw into chaos everything and forget about all the stuff that happened last week. Nothing like that, thankfully. By the way, Brooke is here.
Hi, I know, sorry, I started talking before.
No, that's the way it goes. It's Monday. You're usually here on Mondays, so great to have you here.
Glad to be here.
Obviously, lots to talk about. Not only the news, but at the very close of the show, one thing I'm excited to talk about is that last week was one of the biggest weeks of news in terms of scandal for the presidency. And there was so much speculation over the course of that week as to what long and short-term ramifications this will have for the president. And now we've got some polling data back, and it is fascinating what has happened and perhaps more importantly, what has not happened after that week. We'll also be joined in the latter half of the show by Rashida Tlaib, a congressional candidate, but it looks like she's gonna be a congresswoman. It looks like she'll be the first Muslim woman congresswoman in American history. She's gonna be joining us to talk about her campaign, what she plans to do if she gets into Congress, and issues like that. So that should be a lot of fun. But first, we're gonna be starting off with something that is not at all fun, and that is a death, the passing of Senator John McCain. Now, this is something that we talked about on the main show on Friday. Obviously, we broke down some of his history. I will be the 1 millionth person to acknowledge that he has a very checkered past in terms of what he has accomplished. There are good things like McCain-Feingold and things like that, his advocacy for refugee resettlement. And then there's bad things like multiple wars. I mean, obviously the war in Iraq, he was one of the leading proponents of it. He was the guy pushing for the surge for years. Now, since then, he has acknowledged that entire endeavor was a mistake and that he bears a great deal of the blame for it. So do with that information what you will. But he did pass, and we've had now a few days to sort of absorb it as a country. And there are some things lingering in the background that are incredibly frustrating to me. But what did you think about the passage of what is objectively a big figure in the Senate, whether you like or despise him?
Right, for sure. That's inarguable, I think. Is that a word? Did I just make that up? It happens.
That makes sense to me.
It's a word. Okay, I'm getting the thumbs up. But I think for me, and I said this Friday on the main show, my thing is that for me personally, I feel like, how do I say this? They say like don't speak ill of the dead. And I say for me, that's more about the people who are living, who are left behind from this person. Someone pointed this out on Twitter this morning and I can't remember their name, but I was like, yes, it's exactly how I feel. Then specifically the dead themselves. And so for me, I feel like I just want to, be thinking and be kind to his family who again lost their dad, their husband, their grandpa, things like that. But at the same time, I also respect that not everyone has to feel that way. Not everyone has to process things that way. And he did have a lot of policies. His civil rights voting record, his LGBTQ voting record are not great when it comes to marginalized communities. And so I also respect that not everyone deals and speaks like I do. And also, just because I want to just kind of, be thinking about, his family right now doesn't mean I have some revisionist history going on in my head, because I don't.
Yeah, you don't have no obligation to lie about his record.
Yeah, for me, I think it's sad that someone lost their dad.
I 100% agree. And as I noted on the show, I lost my father to cancer. So perhaps I have some sort of special, and obviously a lot of people have cancer. It's incredibly common. That's the big tragedy of cancer, is that it's all over the place. We should note too, though, that while we express it as people process things differently, if they process it, we don't know about it. If they process it and then say something in their day-to-day life, we don't know about it. The only way that we know that someone's processing something differently than us is if people take this as an opportunity to go on social media and say, I think it's important that I be affiliated with this message. I want to make sure that this moment does not pass without you knowing that I feel this way about this particular topic. And that's why you have, I think, the very divisive, different stances in terms of how you talk about John McCain. Now, on the negative side, perhaps the highest profile version of this has been Donald Trump himself, who, well, if we bring up this headline, you're gonna see that the White House had a statement prepared about John McCain, and that was apparently blocked by Donald Trump, according to sources inside of the White House. So that could have been released, and it was not. Donald Trump was allegedly, I haven't seen the video yet, but I have read that this morning he was asked for the first time in person about John McCain, and he chose not to answer. Perhaps he didn't hear it, I guess. And we know that he put out a tweet right after the announcement of the death or sometime that day, offering condolences to the family, but saying nothing about John McCain. Now, obviously, they did not get along very well, perhaps with good reason. And I think that John McCain handled it more maturely than Donald Trump did. I mean, Donald Trump, one of the early scandals in his candidacy was the I prefer war heroes that weren't captured, something like that. That in any previous election cycle would have sunk a candidacy, but not in this case.
Right. I think that statement can be said about a lot of different arguments and kind of personality battles that have been had with our president. That one would say the other person handled it with more maturity.
Yeah. Yeah. Now,
that's just where we are.
If you would like to see the person who handled it with the least maturity, making Donald Trump look semi-presidential by comparison, that would be Kelly Ward, candidate in the primary that's upcoming. Actually, I believe it's tomorrow in Arizona. So on Facebook, there was a post about how, and remember, this is coming before he died. This is after the announcement that he was foregoing treatment. And you can see that at the end, when the theory is that this was a plan to take media attention off of her campaign, she responds, I think they wanted to have a particular narrative that they hope is negative to me. Now, these messages have since been deleted, but the idea that this guy and his family announced that he's going off of treatment for his terminal cancer to take the attention off of you is a level of self-obsession that I've never seen before.
It's important to note that statement ended up coming just hours before he actually did pass away.
Yeah, if that's your theory, wait a bit. Yeah. Wait just a little bit, because as stupid as it objectively was before we found out, yeah, maybe. Now, the problem in this particular situation is that Kelly Ward's chief opponent in that race is Joe Arpaio, a person who is, for other reasons, one of the worst people in the country. And so in that primary battle, there's really, I don't know what you're supposed to do. You get the person who thinks that John McCain died to hurt her chances, and the guy who is one of the most high-profile races in law enforcement.
You know what? I think this is a good thing to point out, that whether you like it or not, we are in this space now where things like this and this vitriol, this nastiness actually wins voters over.
Yeah, it might well.
That's
and that theory,
what happens, and you wonder if this, I mean, I think, it's not for me to say who's what type of person or not, but I think that you wonder if it's an act, or, I mean, it doesn't matter if you're gonna do it regardless, or if it's right, if it's strategic.
Yeah, one of my favorite, I guess, games or pastimes in recent years is what can you get people to believe? So you just say something at them that if they were to believe it, it would feel good, and see if they believe it. And when that comes out, there was a lot of news coverage about Kelly Ward's comments. What percentage of the people in that state who despise John McCain
because of the issues with the president,
exactly, for whatever reason, see that thing by Kelly Ward and think, you know what, she nailed it there. Maybe it's not a lot, maybe it's 20%. But some people agreed with that purely because they despise John McCain.
Right, and so taking a dig at him makes them feel good. That's okay, that's my girl, that's my winner, and that's just where we are. Can we talk about something else that kind of went viral over the weekend regarding this? The video at the campaign rally.
Yes.
Do you have that coming up?
Or we don't know, but feel free to summarize.
I think that's been interesting, and how this has started this giant conversation in how we speak about someone who was popular, well-known, after they die. And it's been a fascinating conversation. And bringing up the video where the woman at the McCain rally says—
back during his presidential campaign.
Barack Obama is an Arab, and he says, no, he's not, he's a good man, essentially. And what that meant, and if that was actually a moment that showed kindness or appropriateness, or if
It's a mixed moment.
It's
in
a
various
mixed
ways.
moment. I saw a really good breakdown though after the fact, after a lot of back and forth. People, of course, are saying no because he's saying the opposite of an Arab person is.
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
Yeah.
Is a good person. And then people are saying he should have corrected her, and then other people are saying no, he didn't know what was going on.
That he wasn't really responding to a particular thing that he said. He was responding to, I see you, I see what you're saying, I know where you're coming from.
Yes.
And I'm responding to that. But no, we do have to take our first break. But very interesting topic. So when we come back, we're gonna break down a little bit more about that video. And then I wanna read just 2 of the short Twitter tributes to John McCain coming from sources that you might not expect after this. Back to the show, everyone. Joined as always on Mondays by Brooke Thomas. We're talking a little bit more about the passing of John McCain and that I guess controversial isn't the right word. The video of him during his campaign.
Conversations that
yes,
surprisingly his death has started.
And look, I agree. The video is not. People want examples of Republicans being responsible, so we might be investing into that video more than was really there. But I do think it's worth something. Like, I can't imagine, we had like 18 Republican candidates the last time around. I don't know if a single one of them would have had that interaction, as flawed as it is, which is, again, a low bar. But the thing is, for me, the easiest and cheapest thing in the world that sort of masquerades as context is, here is a thing, can I find a bad example of something that this thing has done? I'm not saying that this is purely about John McCain.
I'm working with you, yeah.
But in everything, it's, here is a person, for instance, let's say Republican X stands up and criticizes Donald Trump's policy on Y. Okay, well that's interesting. Okay, so now we have to think about this person. This is a person who's a Republican politician. I almost certainly disagree with him on a great many issues, but here he is actually standing up like I say I want people to against Donald Trump. And that's a complicated process of weighing different things. And a lot of people, I think, especially in the modern day, want mental get out of jail free cards where they don't have to go through that process. And so they think, if I can find a thing this person has done that I don't like, I don't have to think about anything that they do. And for some people that counts as historical context, but for me that's just not thinking. That's not critical thinking.
No, and I respect that. I think the problem with the way that just even what you just said, it kind of gives the idea that there's just a pool of good things and one bad thing, or one thing that they disagree with.
Not to say that John McCain only did one bad thing. He did many bad things.
So I think that's where the argument shifts, though. So when the majority if we're just talking about policies, are things that would harm you and people who look like you, people who belong to your community, and then there are a couple good things towards the end. It's not, you didn't have to search hard.
That's true, yeah.
So I think
I'm not saying he's the best example.
No,
this is just something that I've noticed for a long time. It's people don't want to expend a lot of cognitive effort, and so I see people in media that play to that and think and say I'm the one who is going to stop you from having to think, and that's a great relief in a complicated world. Now John McCain has done a great many terrible things, and they're about as terrible as things can be in terms of, like, if you advocate for a war and it kills hundreds of thousands of people, it's hard to imagine something you could do that's worse.
Right, and yeah, I think it's just the conversation that has started because of someone passing away. It's been fascinating to watch. I mean, just like kind of just sitting back and just reading tweets and just watching media coverage. And is there a rule who is deserving of all positivity? Because when you think about people who have died at the hands of police brutality, I'm curious as to why those victims aren't given that ultimate immediate respect. Like, hey, someone has died. There's a mother who is, grieving her son right now. There's a brother who's grieving his brother. You know what I mean? I wonder, is it only politicians? Is it only Republican politicians? Did Kennedy get the same type of reaction?
Which Kennedy?
Well, any. But
any? Ted Kennedy did, yeah.
Okay.
And obviously he's a guy who's done bad stuff as well.
Right.
And
so it's just been interesting to me, and it's at the end of it, there's a family that's
which is part of what I care about. And look, part of this is just me paying too much attention, I guess, to what's going on Twitter. I suppose that I should do less of that. But like in this particular case, John McCain is not some peripheral historical figure where people are not aware of what he did. So look, I could have gone on Twitter after he died, and I could have done 10 tweets about awful policies that he supported. And I guarantee those would have gotten tons of likes, tons of retweets. But I got news for you. Not a single person who read those tweets would have been just discovering then the things that he did. Everyone's aware of it. John McCain's one of the most well-known politicians in the country.
That is true.
Which is why I think I'm going to stand up for two politicians that said nice things about him, actually, in the minutes after he had died. One, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's appeared on this program, tweeted, John McCain's legacy represents an unparalleled example of human decency and American service. As an intern, I learned a lot about the power of humanity and government through his deep friendship with Senator Kennedy. He meant so much to so many. My prayers are with his family. She has received thousands of critical comments on that. And I would just, like, if I could ask each of those people, do you think that she doesn't know the things that he's done? I guarantee she knows better than the vast majority of people commenting to her. But here's the thing, I've spoken with Alexandria. She is a decent human being who does not need to get a little bit of short-term benefit by dunking on a guy who just died. She can say something nice and then push for policies that he perhaps would oppose. Bernie Sanders also, if we bring this up, said he was an American hero, a man of decency and honor, and a friend of mine. He will be missed, not just in the US Senate, but by all Americans who respect integrity and independence. Jane and I send our deepest condolences to his family. The last sentences of both of those make clear that however much like Bernie Sanders has worked with John McCain for a long time, this is really about the family. And you can say, well, are both of them being naive? That they're acknowledging that he had good characteristics as well as awful ones? I would love to see someone seriously make that case, that Bernie Sanders is just so naive that he doesn't know what John McCain actually stood for.
I don't think it's a bad thing to say something kind about someone, who passed away, to be thinking about their family.
So look,
I don't see a problem with that.
As I said on Friday, when Donald Trump dies, I will tweet, Barron, I'm sorry for you. And then I will begin attacking him. That is the one exception I will carve out for myself, is that when Donald Trump dies, I'm gonna be saying some stuff on Twitter. But we don't need to do that for everyone. And almost anyone. I mean, life is complex. People do bad things. There's nobody who does not deserve criticism. Bernie Sanders has done bad things as an elected politician. He's made votes that we disagree with. And I could point that out as a reason to tell you that you don't need to listen to what he says, but we understand that the situation is more complex than that.
Yeah, it's okay to send your well wishes to a grieving family. There's nothing wrong with that.
I certainly think so. So we turn to another tragedy, and that of course happened over the weekend in Jacksonville on Sunday night. There was a shooting at a Madden NFL 19 tournament in which 2 people were killed and more were injured. 14 more people were injured, either by being shot or injured in their attempts to flee the venue that was being shot up. Now, a witness told the Florida Times-Union that the man allegedly opened fire after he was eliminated from the contest. So the shooter was a young man who had been involved in the contest. The police are saying they cannot speak to a motive at this point. They have not officially identified the deceased, although people who know them have identified them as Taylor Robertson and Elijah Clayton, and have been engaged in ongoing online tributes to these people. I'd like to show both of those who died. Taylor Robertson went by the name Spot Me Please as a gamer. According to friends and fellow gamers who remembered him on Twitter, he's a quiet father and husband, and you can see a photo of his family here. There was also Elijah Clayton, a 22-year-old, who was described by EA, the company that produces Madden, as consistently one of the best. He went by True Boy as a gamer. And obviously, I mean, we're talking about just a 22-year-old being killed there from California, by the way. And you can see a picture of him as well. Obviously, many others were injured. These were the two at this point that we know passed away in that shooting.
This is what, the 250th, something like that? It's mass shooting?
This year.
This year. Isn't that, when you think of that number, it sounds like something this decade. It's that it should, this year.
Yeah, or more than a decade.
Right.
Like if you said there's been 250 mass shootings in American history, that sounds like a lot.
That still sounds like a lot to me, it does. And to think this year and what's gonna be done?
Well, absolutely nothing will be done. I saw the NRA was doing some kind of video about this. They didn't talk about guns in it. They talked about video games. I got news for you. Madden, I guess I can't say it's not a violent video game. I guess people are tackling each other.
Right.
It's a sport. It's just a sport. Arguably less violent than the real sport, since the only people being injured are digital. And obviously a tragedy. And honestly, like when we talk about a story like this, I think, okay, so we've covered a number of mass shootings on the damage report, but what about the 235 that we haven't talked about? What were those people's stories? And obviously your entire newscast every day could be analysis of mass shootings in America. And I can't help but feel, as many as I've covered, like I'm not doing my job by not acknowledging all of them. But that's the horrible situation that we've set up for ourselves as a country.
Yeah.
Not that we're just in. This is not a passive thing. We've created this situation socially and especially politically from our lack of willingness to actually do something about this problem.
Yeah, this is a disappointment for a lot of people. And it happens in Florida so often as well. And you would think that this would be at the top of importance for politicians there, and a lot of families over and over and over are still hopeful that one day it will be.
Yeah, and obviously Florida was the site of the shooting that created this student-led anti-gun movement that is still going on. The March for Our Lives continues to travel around the country. Florida, by the way, has their primary elections tomorrow. And so while this already would have been a gigantic issue, the gun issue, mass shootings in particular, it will even be a larger one now. But just a horrible situation. And the idea that like just the anticipation, like I feel this dread, the anticipation of what the spin for these will be. I already saw the NRA saying that this is a product of it being a gun-free zone. They'll say whatever they have to say to continue to sell guns, and it's just depressing at this point. And obviously I feel terrible for the families. Okay, we're gonna take our second break. When we come back, a video of a child being reunited with his family after being separated at the border. Another just heartbreaking video. And then a little bit of good news coming out of the Democratic Party. Some of the reforms that were announced over the weekend. We'll be breaking those down after this. Welcome back, everyone. John Idarola, Brooke Thomas. This is the Damage Report. And now we're gonna talk about the ongoing situation at the border. Obviously, the media has largely moved on. We know that there were originally 2,600 immigrant families that were broken apart. A good chunk have been reunited. That's the good news, and you might have heard about that. Hopefully people are acknowledging that more than 500 kids are still separated from their parents. That seems sort of significant. If the original scandal had been 500 families were separated, I like to think that would still be major news. And yet that's the situation we're left with after this entire thing has been resolved. That seems weird looking at it as an outsider. But what I want to talk about is a horrible situation that demonstrates the ongoing damage of this family separation policy, because I've been witnessing since this situation, the right has come up with a new favorite little catchphrase to throw into the news. So you have the situation like with Molly Tibbetts, where Molly Tibbetts was tragically killed. We believe it is likely that he is an undocumented immigrant. It isn't guaranteed at this point, but it certainly seems likely. And so what they have to say, it is now a part of their DNA, is that Molly Tibbetts was permanently separated from her family as a way of mocking the concern over family separations at the border. And as a way to constantly remind you that they don't care about those kids at all. So here's the thing, that phrase, the permanent separation, is designed to make you believe that, oh, this thing is wrapped up. Doesn't matter that those family separations happened. There's no ongoing damage, it's just a temporary thing. Well, that might be the case. You can certainly talk to those 500 kids who still haven't seen their families and see how they think about it. But even those who have been reunited might have ongoing, lingering trauma as a result of that. And we have a video showing a demonstration of a child who is going by Sammy. I don't believe it's his name, but he is reunited with his mother. And in this video, you'll see that things did not go as happily and cheerfully as some might lead you to believe will happen.
It gives me chills.
It's tragic.
Yeah, it is tragic. And this is not, this is video evidence of something that psychologists have been saying all along. Since as soon as we found out that this was happening, that this was our government's policy, psychologists have been saying that this is going to produce long-term effects, that this is going to be even more damaging than what these children are experiencing just in the moment, which is damaging enough.
Yeah,
the fear and the terror of being, taken away from your family.
And not knowing why.
And just in dealing with that and how horrible that is, it's not gonna end once they get back with their family. And now we're seeing what they've been saying. These are reasons why this was not okay.
Yeah, and I realize those who might be listening to the podcast, obviously if you don't speak Spanish, you didn't see the translations, but the child is crawling away from his mother, saying, and she's saying, what happened, why is this happening, he's traumatized. And from what I have read from child psychologists, there's both the predisposition for later depression and anxiety, both in the short term and possibly in the long term, but also specifically in terms of the brains of children of the age that many of these kids who've been separated are. If they are separated, they cannot conceive of some third party, the government, that caused it. They think either I did something wrong or she did something wrong. And in either case, it is going to cause damage. Now, maybe in a month that kid will be fine, or in a year, or maybe never. Maybe that kid will always have issues with his parents now, or more generalized, an issue with authority figures or family or intimacy or God knows what.
At any age as a child, it would be impossible to understand why mommy isn't coming back and getting me. Why did she leave me here? You don't understand that she didn't leave you here. How can you understand? I can't imagine understanding that at 16, let alone this child doesn't, what is this child, 2 or 3?
Yeah. Tragic. And they mock the idea of permanent damage being done.
Right, and you brought up Molly Tibbetts. I think there's some irony in the fact that, at least from the official story that we're getting, that the person who allegedly murdered her is someone who wouldn't leave her alone. Essentially, she wanted to be left alone, and there's some irony in that being what happened. Like, she told someone basically, no, go away. And now, even in death, her family is saying, leave her alone. And they can't even get that.
Yeah, it seems, and we don't know. We know very little bit about it. But I have not seen any evidence that he killed her because he's an undocumented immigrant. It appears to be a case of toxic masculinity, if anything.
And also there is a responsibility.
Really fast, whereas these kids were separated from their families specifically because of their status, their legal status, their country of origin. That is exactly why it happened. And by the way, here's a crazy thought. You can care about both.
Absolutely, you should.
And by the way, if you're a conservative, how much more would your supposed concern for the victims of undocumented immigrant crime be bolstered by at least pretending to care about these kids? To pretend that the 500 kids that are still separated is something like a national tragedy. I personally think that should be in history books. The idea that not only that we went through this thing as a country, but that they're still separated. Many will never see their parents again. And many, like the New York Times is saying, a lot of the youngest kids reunited with their families, they don't recognize their parents. It's like they're starting over again from birth. But it's not permanent. It's not permanent, just temporary. It's totally fine, don't worry about it, move on. Incredibly frustrating. Okay, let's move with the time that we have left to a little bit of good news. So for some time, feels like 15 years, the Unity and Reform Commission inside the Democratic Party that was set up after the primaries has been working on a suite or several suites of reforms to the Democratic Party. I have previously gone to meetings of the Unity and Reform Commission to report on that. Nomiki Kantz, formerly of TYT, is on the commission and has been fighting for certain reforms. And as of today, we can say that they were successful over the weekend in voting on some of those reforms, including significantly curtailing the power of the so-called superdelegates, who exercise outsized power inside of that primary process. So the change that was voted on will prohibit superdelegates from voting for president at the party's 2020 convention unless the outcome is already assured or it deadlocks, which has not happened in recent memory. And so the concern about superdelegates and the negative effect that they had on the 2016 primary should be severely mitigated in future elections because of this.
Yeah,
the
concern, I guess it alleviates concern.
I guess the concern remaining though is
what could happen though is what.
Yes, what could happen. The concern, I guess, is will the media still list superdelegates inside of the delegate count during primaries? They shouldn't have done it before. They certainly shouldn't do it now that they're not even allowed to vote in the first vote. But it's really gonna be on the individual members of the media, the individual channels, to see what their policy is. And if they continue to list those, it is gonna be pretty transparent as to why, I think.
This is also the start of a lot of changes that Democrats want to happen, specifically regarding primaries and who gets to vote in the primaries, who should be able to, and what they want, what changes they want states to enact. So
and they've made some changes to caucuses, requiring state parties to accept absentee votes, addressing concerns the caucuses are less democratic than primaries because they require physical attendance at a longer process. Caucuses will still be possible, and I understand the frustration that some people have with that. I mean, the problem that you have to understand is that the DNC can't say, hey, Iowa, you can't do caucuses. They don't have that power. They literally can't do that. They can try to provide incentives for states to switch away from caucuses, and the rumor is that in 2020, there will be far fewer of them. But we'll have to see. For now, though, good news. Bernie Sanders speaking very favorably about these reforms, and he was instrumental in setting up the Unity and Reform Commission. So certainly good news out of the Democratic Party this weekend. Okay, we are gonna take a break. When we come back, we'll be joined by a congressional candidate. We're gonna be talking about her race, Rashida Tlaib, the chance that she might become the first Muslim woman in Congress ever in American history, and what she plans to do if she makes it into Congress after this. Welcome back to the show, everyone. So we have had a long cycle so far of primary elections. This week brings primaries in several more states. We'll be doing live election coverage for that tomorrow on the Young Turks. And usually what happens after these primaries is that you have a long campaign, obviously. You go to the general election. That's when you really find out who's gonna have the spot. Sometimes it's a little bit more clear cut than that. And we have a slight example of that with our next guest, Rashida Tlaib, who is running in Michigan's 13th district, joins the show now. Well, welcome to the show. We're glad to have you here. And so I want to talk, first of all, about, it appears that your road to actually winning in November is a little bit clearer than in other cases. And so I'm curious, in that sort of situation, how does that shape how you spend your time campaigning? What sorts of issues you focus on, things like that?
Yeah, so I can tell you I'm obviously helping a lot of my fellow sisters that are out there trying to pick up some seats, progressive women like Gretchen Driscoll, Hallie Stevens, and others that are in Michigan running against strong Republican challengers. But mostly I am also doing what we call community conversations around where do I put my neighborhood service centers, what are some of the issues folks want me to focus on immediately. So I'm continuing to stay rooted and continue to be able to stay connected with my seniors and everybody else that had wanted to play a huge role in how I hit the ground running. And so we're continuing. I'm here actually at the office talking about what senior events that we want to have and trying to reach out to people. Because one of the typical things that happens is, after you win, you disappear. I don't want to be one of those typical politicians that do that.
And that is certainly good to hear. You always hear about, in the past, it was this case where congressmen and women spent a lot of their time with their district. It seems like that's not as big of a thing, so that's certainly good to hear. In terms of your advocacy for other candidates, it took a while for the media to really get the message for the sorts of people that were winning, especially on the Democratic side, and especially Democratic female candidates, in terms of strong progressives like yourself. But now that the media is paying more attention, is that helping in your advocacy for other candidates, that when you go and you speak, that the media is more likely to follow?
I don't know. I have mixed feelings about that because I got to tell you, I liked kind of being under the radar. I like the fact that I didn't have this kind of, microscope of every single thing I say is dissected, or people trying to figure out how is this possible, especially in the Midwest, for somebody of Muslim faith. Not only myself, but also Ilhan Omar getting elected in Minnesota. I mean, these are the things that people start talking about. Why did this happen? Instead of celebrating it, instead of embracing it. I mean, I think we need to be still and just know how incredible that this moment is. The fact that this happened at a time right now in our country that two American Muslim women are now going to be members of the United States Congress. It speaks volumes to just what it means to many of us that have been working really hard on the ground. I mean, I expected only about 60,000 people to come out to vote. 89,000 people came out to vote in the 13th congressional district. Wow. That says that people are awakened, they're engaged, and I'm excited about that. I hope that my other candidates out there that are progressive that are running for office, not to get detoured into this media attention all of a sudden, to stay focused, that the direct door-to-door, staying engaged, staying real is what's important and what should be center to their campaign right now.
I totally understand that, but because I'm in the media, I am going to attempt to distract them. That's sort of my thing. So as you acknowledge there, it turns out in terms of the time zones, are likely to be the first ever Muslim female to enter Congress, although you might not be the only one by the end of that night. But outside of that, what's been fascinating in this cycle is that far more women are running for office, far more women are winning their primaries, especially on the Democratic side. And I've seen analyses showing that across many candidates, actually in this cycle, being a woman has actually been a benefit. You're winning at higher rates than males are. We're not seeing that so much on the Republican side. If the general election, if they go the way that we think that they might, what do you think this sort of reshaping in terms of gender and representation in other areas for Congress, how might that impact different issue areas?
Well, I think that women, the diverse women that are coming, not only myself, Jahana Hayes, Alexandria, Ilhan, myself, I mean, we have a different, unique lens. I mean, half of our colleagues in Congress right now are millionaires. They're in an income bracket that is so out of touch with so many struggles and challenges for working families. Many of them don't understand what it means to send your child to a class size of 35 or more. Many of them don't understand what it means to work multiple jobs. And so with us, I mean, we're going to probably be a shock to the culture that is there in Congress, because we do come from a unique lens as not only as women, but women of color, women that have come from various diverse backgrounds. Many of us having different kinds of positions out in the community, working class positions and jobs. I think it is going to be just a beautiful rainbow of unique kind of approach to public service that I think a lot of us have been lacking or feeling like we didn't have a voice in Congress right now in regards to that. I mean, we finally feel like there at least is a handful of women that are now going to Congress that are not part of the establishment, not part of the same old kind of recycled names, but uniquely different, real. We talk differently from many people that are running for office. We also see things in a very different light than most members of Congress right now. And I hope people embrace that. I hope my colleagues in Congress embrace that and know that it has been lacking. And that's why so many of us don't feel like we have a voice right now in Congress.
And hopefully will be the first of future waves to come in future elections. I had one more question. I want to ask you about a particular issue area, because I was reading an interesting breakdown of how you and Alexandria and a few of the other candidates in the cycle have been talking more about issues of environmental justice and the intersection of issues with the environment and class and race. And I was reading in that research that you've actually battled the Koch brothers over petroleum coke, this like toxic byproduct of these industrial processes that are often dumped in areas where millionaires don't tend to live. And I wanted to ask you both about that battle, and also when you enter Congress, what do you see yourself doing in these areas of environmental justice?
I mean, you have to know in my district, probably over 300 air permits alone are in the particular, I think, 3 zip codes. I have from the waterfront and the international crossing, I have the only petroleum refinery in the state in my district. 1 of 5 children have asthma. I can tell you, my dad, who had 2 forms of cancer, died at the age of 67. Wow. All of us, especially in the Wayne County area in Michigan, have seen an overwhelming kind of a betrayal by public officials and turning their heads away in regards to corporate polluters not following current law. And so for many of us, I think, especially for me, this is not about new laws or new policies. This is about enforcing current law and holding them accountable and not treating them as if they're above the law. When it came to the petroleum coke that was dumped on the riverfront, it was illegally dumped. They didn't apply for a permit. They didn't tell anybody they were doing it. Marathon pretended they didn't know anything about it. But also, it took us some digging around, and we finally found out it was the Koch brothers that had purchased about 20 years worth of, byproduct of the tar sands that were being, funneled in or piped in from Canada. And I was really very much frustrated because the state, and this is before Flint, was saying that it wasn't toxic.
Yeah.
When I got it independently tested and we showed that it was harmful to public health and environment, they changed their mind and said, okay, it's toxic if it's not been contained. But you're going to get someone like me and others that will take an approach that goes beyond just voting the right way, beyond just the press conferences and the statements of actually, jumping over piles and testing it ourselves, taking the matter into our own hands. Because I think relying on government that has now been tainted by corporate greed is not going to be the answer to stop the corporate polluters and hurting our working families.
I couldn't agree more. Well, thank you, Rashida Tlaib, candidate in the 13th district in Michigan. Hopefully you'll rejoin the show at some point when you are Congresswoman Tlaib.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we are coming off of a monumental week in terms of news about the presidency. How has it affected his support out there? We'll be breaking that down after this. Moments remaining. Let's look back last week. Michael Cohen, Paul Manafort, 16 counts. You've been following it. You know what happened. Looks really bad for the president, especially because Michael Cohen stood up in court and implicated the president in those crimes. And then you had all of these different people that know him, that have known him for a long time, flipping and getting immunity deals and all that. And so what effect did that have on the support for the president? Well, let's take a look at this chart, comparing his support in the early part of the week versus after the news had broke. According to this, he dropped 2 points. 2 crummy points. The president was implicated in multiple campaign-related felonies. 2 points. We had renewed news about him paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to hush up women for alleged affairs. Dose. That's all. What do you think? Does this make any sense?
Yes.
Oh.
It doesn't make logical sense, but it makes sense too. This is where we are. Nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
And when I say that often. Not nobody cares, but unfortunately, not enough people in power care. And so what do you then expect for their constituents?
Yeah, and one of the things that worries me about this is that not just that a lot of his supporters didn't drop off, and this is just one poll, maybe we'll see something in future polls.
But what do you really believe? You don't believe you'll really see a difference in future polls?
No, I predicted at the time that I thought that this was important legally, but don't expect, like on Tuesday I said, Sean Hannity is not going to just go on his show and just not have anything to say. Like they're talented, these pillars of state media are talented. They can spin things. If the charges that he was involved in these felonies drops him by only 2 points, what happens when Mueller comes out with the evidence of it? Does that maybe take an additional 2 points? That means you're gonna have more than a third of the country saying, I don't care if he broke the law. And then you might have to have conversations about impeachment or some other potential consequences, knowing that a significant chunk of the country does not care about the law anymore, and that is scary.
But where is the bar? Is the bar of what you should care about or what we're surprised that people do or do not care about, is it just with law? Because there are a bunch of things. We've had this conversation, just at least amongst ourselves, 30 times on different things. You have this percentage of the country saying, I don't care about racism. You have this percentage of the country saying, I don't care about xenophobia. You have this, it's like, I mean, this is where we are. I think the law, unfortunately, is at the bottom of the list of things that I'm shocked that people don't care about.
It's supposed to be the most objective. You have the law. Either you stay, in a good situation according to the law, or you break the law. That's a very easy, but it doesn't matter. A weird thing that has come out of all of this is separate from the law, but that the National Enquirer's
business, their like whole business model is to hide salacious true stories in order to
and then make up fake bad
stuff.
stories.
Yes, that's weird,
Look,
right?
they've been around for 1,000 years. I guess it's a good business model.
We're about to find out.
But anyway, I understand that cults of personality have different levels of strength, but I've been talking a lot about how little I think debates tend to matter in terms of changing support for a person. The various people that we might argue with online, they may not have as strong of a cult as this, but if being implicated in multiple crimes costs 2 points, maybe debate is not gonna shred a movement anytime soon. Anyway, thank you for watching the show. Always good to have you, take part. Glad to have you on as always.
Such a great way to start the week.
Thank you, thank you. I'm ready to end the week. Actually, I'll see you on Friday.
It's been a rough one, huh?
A little bit. Anyway, that's all for today. Tomorrow morning, lots more for you. We'll see you then. To hear even more about both this topic and other issues not being covered nearly enough by the mainstream media, you're going to want to tune in every morning to our full hour-long show. That's at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, available on the TYT Network channel on YouTube TV. Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.